Check. Hello, amigos, also known as friends. Here we are back for another weekly episode of Eyes to See, Vision Beyond the Narrative. Does this sound all right? Check, check. As you can hear behind me, my current paper is printing up. We are on essay number 8 of the 13th episode. I feel like we should have more if we're doing weekly. It's about this time, nearly halfway through the year, that one regrets committing to live streaming every night of the year. It's about this time. But we're going to continue to do it because I said I would. For no other reason than for no other reason than I said I would. And then that shows my children they should be the same. Don't do anything don't say you're going to do something if you're not going to do it. And if you say you're going to do something, come hell or high water, do it. So let's do this. Now, if this is your first time here, I encourage you to go back through the live archives of the Flock Watch channel to find this black and white thumbnail with the eye piercing the dome of the Capitol, and listen to the original 12 episodes. And we only have 8 essays, so some of them don't have an essay, but we're getting the point across. I think we're getting close. We're getting close. This one I wish I had more time with, but it's trashy. Full of diamonds. It's like somebody took a box of diamonds and threw it into a landfill. They're out there, big ones. They're in this paper, but we're going to have to dig them out. So let's do that. And if any of you join while I'm reading and make comments, that'll be great. But I won't read them till I'm done. So let's get after it. This is essay 8. What was I going to change the title to? To judge or not to judge? Actually, I had it as the lost art of judgment and why seeing clearly requires more than just being corruptible. Let's see if this makes sense. To judge or not to judge. Sooner or later, a man who claims he would like to see clearly has to make a judgment. Not a reaction, not a slogan, not a tribal reflex dressed up as a conviction. A judgment. He has to stand firm and say that this is true and that is false. This is good, but that is evil. This is wisdom, but that is manipulation. This is mercy, but that is cowardice. Speaking softly. He has to distinguish between a warning and an attack, between correction and cruelty, between conviction and pride, between compassion and permission. That is the necessity of judgment. Modern people seemingly begin to panic here because judgment itself has become taboo. We have trained ourselves to hear the word as a kind of condemnation. Someone says, "You're judging me," and that is often treated as the end of the argument, as though the act of judging is already a moral crime. But that's nonsense. Every person judges, and more precisely, every person is constantly making judgments. Even the man who says, "Do not judge," is making a judgment. The woman who says, "All views are valid," is judging anyone who disagrees. The culture that condemns judgment does so with great confidence and usually no small amount of self-righteousness. Pretentious, I like to use that word. However, there is no... It sounds like a goddamn war zone outside. Freaking Pueblo, Colorado. Wild. Hopefully they're all killing each other off. However, there is no escaping from judgment. There is only honest judgment or dishonest judgment, careful judgment or reckless judgment, humble judgment or arrogant judgment. The question is not whether we will judge. The question is what kind of people will we be when we do judge? It's much easier to pretend judgment itself is the danger than to examine the condition of the person doing the judging. A disordered person does not stop judging. He only judges poorly. He judges from appetite, resentment, fear, embarrassment, tribal loyalty, and the need to remain innocent in his own mind. A man ruled by appetite will judge whatever feeds the appetite as reasonable. A man ruled by resentment will judge whatever punishes his enemies as justice. A man ruled by fear will judge control as safety. A man ruled by pride will judge correction as an attack. I seriously think for 30 minutes those sirens have been going off nonstop. Like, get over yourself. Turn them off. A man ruled by tribal loyalty will judge his side's shortcomings as unfortunate complications and the other side's shortcomings as proof of evil. We have spent several weeks on this show talking about deception, certainty, rhetoric, first principles, self-deception, narrative, and reality. We have looked at the way power shapes perception, the way political identities offered a borrowed certainty, the way rhetoric replaces reason, and the way false narratives protect us from humiliating evidence, the humiliating evidence of our own lives. Last time we talked about the fact that reality is not interested in your narrative. Reality does not negotiate. Reality does not flatter. It does not ask whether the truth will be emotionally convenient before it presents the evidence. But once reality does interrupt the story, a man then has to decide what the interruption means. He has to weigh evidence, name the pattern, examine the motive, test the language, and act in the world. Being correctable is necessary, but it is not the end goal. A man who is willing to be corrected but unwilling to judge becomes passive. He sits in the rubble of his old certainty and waits for someone else to tell him what reality means. And someone else is always glad to perform that service. Power. Powerful people. Power is very willing to provide judgment for people who have surrendered their own. Institutions will define justice for you. Parties will define loyalty for you. Media systems will craft a picture of compassion for you. Algorithms will define what is relevant for you. Mobs will define morality for you. Experts will define danger for you. Because God only knows that experts know everything that's dangerous for you. I don't know about you, but I was the entire opposite growing up. Little smarty pants that literally couldn't respect any statements of truth from adults. because I saw how many times they were wrong and how many things they didn't know. That's arrogance, but there's a value in it. The value is that shit, where were we? Mysticism, crowd browsing, passion. Yeah, experts defining danger. I mean, there are experts that I respect, but it's because they've done things I respect, not because they have letters behind their name or a degree on their wall. It's because they've done things. And they don't, those quote unquote experts that I don't trust don't get to define anything for me. But when you're weak like that, bureaucracies will define responsibility for you. If ordinary people lose the ability to judge, judgment doesn't disappear. It's handed over to the systems of corruption. We were told that refusing judgment would make us free, generous, open-minded, and compassionate, but in reality, it has often made us dependent and governable. We still make moral distinctions, but we increasingly need permission to make them. We wait for approved language. We wait for institutional signals. We wait for the tribe to decide whether a fact is usable or dangerous. We wait to see who's allowed to be criticized and who must be protected from criticism. We wait to see which sins count and which sins can be renamed as complexity. This is not moral maturity. It is outsourced. It is an outsourced conscience. The lost art of judgment cannot be recovered by information alone. We keep imagining that the answer to confusion is more data, more articles, more podcasts, more documents, more interviews, and more exposure to the hidden machinery behind events. There is value in information, and a man cannot judge well if he refuses to know what is happening. But information does not purify the person who receives it. A proud man with more information becomes more proud and more articulate in his pride. A resentful man with more information becomes more sophisticated in his resentment. A fearful man with more information becomes more persuasive in his fear. I should put convinced by his fear. Knowledge does not automatically purify the knower. Sometimes it only sharpens the misguided weapon. Bad judgment does not usually feel bad from the inside. From the inside, bad judgment can often feel like clear, brave, compassionate, or loyal. It feels morally serious. A person may be absolutely certain, not because he sees clearly, but because every part inside of him that would have complicated the verdict has been silenced. That's a tricky one. I was going to erase that. They become absolutely certain, not because they see clearly, but because everything inside of him it muddles the waters, we'll say, muddies the waters. So he doesn't see clearly. He becomes certain. Why do they become certain? We have to go back to our uncertainty paper. His fear, though, has been renamed as prudence. His anger has been renamed courage. His envy has been renamed justice. His cowardice has been renamed kindness. His pride has been renamed conviction. Once the names have been changed, the conscience is easier to fool. Judgment is not pretending to know everything. Authentic human judgment is not one occupying God's throne and handing down final verdicts from the clouds. Human beings are finite creatures. We see partially. We know only partially. We are limited by time, space, memory, desire, fear, ignorance, and self-interest. No honest person should speak as though he sees the whole of anything. Absolute certainty only belongs to the absolute, as we have previously discussed. However, limited knowledge does not excuse a moral laziness. The mistake of the modern coward is discovering that human beings cannot know everything, and then he acts as though we cannot know anything. He hides inside complexity. He says, "Who am I to judge?" when what he really means is, "I don't want the burden or responsibility of judging." He dresses his indecision as humility. He calls passivity compassion. He refuses to make moral distinctions because distinctions require courage, and courage always risks being hated by someone else. Humility is not the refusal to judge. Humility is the refusal to judge as though one is God. A humble man can still say that something is wrong. He can still say a claim is false, a leader is lying, a habit is destructive, an ideology is poisonous, a policy is unjust, or a movement has traded truth for power. In fact, he must be able to say such things because a man who cannot make moral distinctions isn't humble. He's helpless. The difference is that the humble man does not confuse his judgment with omniscience, all-knowingness. He does not pretend to see the whole. He does not enjoy condemnation. He knows his verdict may need correction because he knows he himself is still correctable. The narrow road is to judge without pretending to be God, and to remain correctable without becoming a coward. There's one of those diamonds. First principles matter because a man cannot judge clearly if he has never examined the foundation of his conclusions. If he cannot define justice without borrowing somebody else's slogan, he cannot judge whether a movement is just. If he cannot define freedom, he cannot tell the difference between liberty and appetite. If he cannot define compassion, he cannot tell whether he is helping someone or merely protecting them from the consequences that might have saved them. If he cannot define truth, he will eventually confuse whatever is useful, popular, or emotionally satisfying with what is true. Words become dangerous when they are detached from reality. Justice detached from truth can become revenge. Freedom detached from self-command becomes slavery to appetite. Tolerance detached from moral limits becomes a surrender. Safety detached from courage becomes only control. These are not clever contradictions. They are the ordinary corruptions of public life once language has been severed from the first principles. Judgment requires more than emotion. Emotion can alert us to something, but it cannot be allowed to rule the court. Anger may tell us that something precious has been violated, but anger cannot be trusted to write the verdict by itself. Pity may tell us that someone is suffering, but pity cannot be allowed to erase lawful standards. Fear may tell us danger is near, but fear cannot be allowed to build the whole political order. Loyalty may bind us to people we love, but loyalty cannot be allowed to turn lies into virtues. The passions are witnesses. The passions are witnesses. They are not judges. A person who lets every feeling climb into the judgment seat will eventually call it discernment, when it is really only a mood with a microphone. This is one reason our public arguments are so deranged. People do not merely disagree, they feel that their emotional state has become actual evidence. If a claim makes them afraid, it must be dangerous. If it makes them angry, it must be evil. If it makes them feel compassionate, it must be righteous. If it makes them uncomfortable, it must be harmful. The feeling becomes the verdict, and the mind gets hired afterward to defend it. That's not thinking. That's PR for the self PR for the appetite. The slavery to oneself. True judgment requires the slower work of formation. It requires humility, definition, patience, courage, and contact with the reality. It requires the willingness to let what's real interrupt the first conclusion that feels satisfying. It requires asking not whether a claim helps my side, but whether the claim is true. Not only whether a policy sounds compassionate, but what it produces over time. Not only whether an argument punishes the people I dislike, but whether it's a just argument. Not only whether I can defend a position, but what kind of person I must become in order to keep defending it. Every judgment forms the judge. If I repeatedly judge from resentment, I become resentful. If I repeatedly judge from fear, I become fearful. And so on. If I repeatedly excuse my own side and condemn my opponents for the same sins, I become dishonest. If I repeatedly call appetite freedom, cowardice mercy, and anger courage, I eventually lose the ability to tell the difference. The eye adjusts to darkness. Clear sight requires a repentance, not merely analysis. A man who cannot confess his own false judgments will not become wise. He will only become better defended. He may learn new arguments. He may refine his language. He may gather better evidence. But if he never allows his own verdicts to be judged, then his judgment remains corrupt at the root. The judge must also be judged. Modern people love accountability in every direction except inward. We want corrupt officials judged. We want lying journalists judged. We want greedy corporations judged. We want hypocritical politicians judged. We want foolish movements, arrogant experts, dishonest activists, and cowardly leaders judged. Many of them should be. But the man demanding judgment on the world must eventually stand under the judgment himself. Otherwise, his demand for truth becomes another method of self-protection. Human beings were not designed to be final authorities. We are creatures, not gods. When we forget that, judgment becomes monstrous, destructive. We begin to enjoy the guilty seat too much, provided someone else is in it. We confuse our anger with divine wrath and our preferences with moral law. We speak as though the whole of reality has been placed conveniently inside our little skulls. And that is how judgment can become tyranny. The answer to tyrannical judgment is not the abolition of judgment. That's impossible. The answer is judgment under authority, judgment under truth, judgment under conscience, judgment under the humble knowledge that the line between good and evil does not run safely outside of me where I can study it from a distance. It runs through the center of me. That realization does not make judgment unnecessary. It makes judgment sober. Another diamond, in case you were keeping track. A sober judge does not need to pretend evil is harmless. He does not need to flatten every distinction in the name of kindness. God, the judges now are so insane. I was talking yesterday. This pretentious, self-righteous, twisted judge sentences a man who killed, in a car wreck, killed the daughter of a man and her grandparents, which would either be his parents or his in-laws, if I remember correctly from yesterday. And this man, the father of the dead daughter and dead parents or in-laws, was in the court when the judgment of, you are guilty, sir. You have killed these people. You have taken their lives. And therefore, I will sentence you to 120 hours of community service. The end. The father jumps up and is like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, what part of your fucking ass isn't covering your head? How do you let somebody off that's killed my own daughter? I mean, he didn't exactly say all these things, but these are some of the things I might have said. Instead, he picked up a chair and chucked it at her. God, I hope he hit her. I fucking hope he hit her right in between the eyes. David and Goliath. But the ironic thing is, he's going to be severely punished. Felony assault, 20 years in prison on a federal employee. When the person that killed his daughter, bruh, if they let me in the courtroom and that guy's in there, it won't take long before he has a pencil in his neck. Just saying, don't kill my daughter. Because you, by killing my daughter, are killing yourself. Okay, back to the story here. Sober judge does not need to pretend. Is that where we jumped out? That may sound strange to modern ears. No, we're not doing that. He doesn't need to flatten every distinction in the name of kindness. Yeah, he doesn't need to call disorder health, lies, perspective. But that's what they're doing. They're calling men women and women men. They're calling disease health, lies, perspective, or cowardice, nuance. But neither does he enjoy condemnation. He does not rush to the verdict because the verdict makes him feel clean. He does not use truth as a club merely because someone else deserves the bruise. He judges because reality requires distinction and because love requires distinction. We're talking about a sober judge here, right? He doesn't need to do all these twisted things that the bad judges do. That may sound strange to modern ears because we have come to imagine love as the suspension of judgment. Oh, if you love somebody, you're not going to tell them what they're doing is wrong. Oh, that didn't exactly sound the way I thought it would when it came out, huh? But love does not eliminate judgment. Love purifies judgment. A father who loves his child must judge between what the child wants and what will be good for him. A coach who loves his athletes must judge between encouragement and correction. A friend who loves another friend must judge between loyalty and cowardice. A citizen who loves his country must judge between patriotism and idolatry. A man who loves truth must judge between reality and the narratives that flatter him. The refusal to judge is often not love at all. It's exhaustion. It's fear. It's the desire to be liked. It's the hope that if we never draw the line, no one will ask me to defend one. It's a moral laziness wearing a gentle face. And reality does not honor that evasion. A culture that refuses to judge disorder will eventually live inside disorder. A culture that refuses to judge lies will eventually be governed by liars. Sound familiar? If there's a state governed any more by liars than Colorado, I would love to hear about it. A culture that refuses to judge cowardice will eventually call surrender peace. A culture that refuses to judge appetite will eventually watch appetite devour its children. A culture that refuses to judge evil will not become merciful. It will become prey. That sounds harsh only because we have mistaken softness for goodness. Goodness is not softness. Goodness is rightly ordered love. Rightly ordered love must be able to say that something is false, destructive, unjust, cowardly, corrupt, or evil without apologizing for the existence of these moral boundaries. Not every boundary is hated. Not every correction is cruelty. Not every wound is abuse. Surgery wounds, discipline wounds, repentance wounds, truth wounds. Truth wounds the part of us that has made peace with a lie. The question is whether that wound is ordered towards healing. Understand, a proper surgery, while a wound can improve the quality of life. That's the difference between judgment and condemnation. Condemnation delights in the fall of others. Judgment seeks the truth of everything. Condemnation wants the guilty person crushed. Judgment wants reality clarified. Condemnation feels pride. Feeds. Condemnation feeds pride. Judgment, rightly practiced, serves truth. Sometimes truth is severe because lies have been allowed to become comfortable. A man who wants eyes to see must recover this art of judgment. Not the cheap judgment of the partisan, the theatrical judgment of the mob, the self-satisfied judgment of the hypocrite, or the algorithmic judgment of whatever outrage machine has trained his attention this entire week. He needs judgment rooted in a reality, disciplined by humility, sharpened by first principles, restrained by conscience, and willing to begin with himself. If judgment does not begin with the self, it almost always becomes a weapon against someone else. Another diamond. Let's say that one again. If judgment does not begin with the self, it almost always becomes a weapon against someone else. The man who cannot judge his own motives will overjudge the motives of his enemies. The man who cannot confront his own appetite will become strangely tolerant of the corruption that feeds it. The man who cannot admit his own fear will build moral arguments around his cowardice. The man who cannot confess his own pride will call his arrogance clarity. This is how blindness survives inside people who claim to see. They judge constantly but never judge themselves. The recovery of judgment begins with the willingness to ask what part of the verdict belongs to me. What desire is shaping my conclusion? What fear am I protecting? What would I call this? Same behavior if it came from someone else I disliked. What would I see if my enemy did it? What truth am I avoiding because it would require me to change? These questions don't weaken judgment, they cleanse it. They purify it. Get ready for some diamonds. A man who has been judged by truth becomes less eager to play God with others, but he also becomes less willing to play the coward. He knows that mercy without truth becomes sentimentality. He knows that truth without mercy becomes cruelty. He knows that certainty without humility becomes idolatry. He knows that a doubt without courage becomes paralysis. He judges, but he remains correctable. He speaks, but he listens. He distinguishes, but he remembers his own capacity for error. He names what is false, but he does not pretend that every falsehood lives safely outside of him. The immature person has only two settings: a blind certainty or total passivity. Either he knows everything or nobody can know anything. Either his side is righteous or all sides are the same. Either judgment is absolute or judgment is forbidden. But maturity learns to live in the harder place. It acts under limitation. It makes distinctions without pretending to possess omniscience. It tells the truth it can see while remaining obedient to the truth it has not yet seen. That's not weakness, that's maturity. Without judgment, seeing clearly remains impossible, because eyes that cannot distinguish truth from falsehood are blind. They are merely open but cannot see. The answer to poor judgment is not no judgment at all. The answer to bad judgment is good judgment. A righteous judgment that is humbled by the finite, corrected by reality, sharpened by definitions, and purified by the willingness to confess when the verdict touches us first. A man who cannot judge will only be led. A man who falsely judges will destroy, only destroy. But a man who learns to judge righteously becomes hard to deceive, hard to purchase, harder to frighten into surrendering his conscience. And that may be one of the first signs that his eyes are beginning to see. The end. All right, folks, there you got my wisdom of the week. Blah, blam, just dropped on the table there for your viewing enjoyment. I got a lot of work to do, and we got no comments, no viewers. There's always one viewer, but they're usually on Twitch. Bots. So I know, no comments, we're out of here. Waddy Watts, eyes to see, vision beyond narrative. Come back for some more entertaining insights from the saturated mind of yours truly. I'm trying to get to a place where we're like coming full circle on all of these. Maybe SA 10. We have 8 today, 9 next week, and then 10. And that'll get us halfway through the year, right? What will we spend the second half of the year doing? Judging others righteously? Maybe we should. Matter of fact, you know what I would like to do? You know how they have reaction videos to other people's music videos or whatnot? I'd like to do reaction videos to other people that do YouTube videos that annoy the shit out of me. I mean, ironic, isn't it? Somebody with 100,000 subs or 500,000 or 1,000,000 subs is annoying the shit out of me. But if they annoy me, I'm probably not the only one. I've noticed this habit. What I'm thinking of specifically is I noticed this habit of YouTubers walking on eggshells with every fucking word they choose to say or not say. Like as if the reach is going to evaporate if they say Trump. The reach is going to evaporate if they say Israel. The reach is going to evaporate if they say anything. Specifically, Jesse on Fire. I can't. What's crazy is that I've kind of followed him from the beginning because he was arrogant as fuck. A little bit funny, but I was like, bro, I'm just waiting for you to fall. But fake it till you make it, and he made it. And now he's, you know, on the circuit, so to speak. And a lot of the stuff he does is entertaining. However, that irritation of, and this thing is, you know, one of those things. Like he shows it on the screen, but he doesn't say it. And it's probably because it's something that came from those people. And those people didn't really like that guy. And we don't want to say what that is, but you all know what that is, right? Like, bro, you're going to run out of words to not say. Just say Kim Kardashian is slanging coke, trafficking kilos. That was his video. Something about Kardashian, and they busted some truck with a bunch of kilos in it. But it was all horse shit because they were like 90 kilos, which is 198 pounds with a street value of $8.4 million. Bruh. Not that I know exactly, but that's closer to 2 million, not 8.4. It's crazy how they always break it down into the end price. Why you just don't break it down into the kilo price? Because there is a price for the kilo. Last I remember was 30 G's, but I've known it to be different. Not saying I've ever paid for one, for sure. That is the truth. But you hear things, you know, if you pay attention. And if you watch fucking movies. Duh. But, you know, you're not buying 8 balls. You're not buying 198 pounds of 8 balls. And that's what that fucking $8.4 million is. Anyway, I digress. So he's sitting there saying you can't say Israel. You can't say child porn. You can't say chomo, you can't say child molester, you can't say, what the fuck else can you not say? Trump. My reach gets cut in half. We'll go ahead and cut mine in half and we'll see if I give a shit. You know, now that we've established this is the license to judge, we'll call it. The license to judge episode. But understand that we learn one must judge righteously. Otherwise, there's a danger. So I kind of went after it ad nauseum. If you didn't get it, go back and listen. But now that we got it, we got to have clear eyes and we got to be able to stand up and say, that's fucking horseshit. Yeah, go back and listen to it again. Because this one's good. I'm not saying it's good, it's entertaining, it's information. I'm saying it is solid. We've got to get to this place where we can see past that bullshit. That's why it's called vision beyond narrative. Narrative is just the bullshit. And I've always said that my generation grew bullshit detectors out of our heads like antennas as we became of age, 18, 20, 25, whatever. Our little bullshit detectors were grown out after we blossomed. The next generation were born with bullshit detectors. Can I attribute that to the millennials? But something happened between then and now where there's still so many people easily deceived. Because I remember when the internet was blowing up, I was like, you couldn't fucking bullshit about things. Anything that was inauthentic was not getting traction in many circles. And now there's all kinds of bullshit still deceiving people. I'm not talking just politics. Music is the worst. Movies are the fucking worst. You know, I've been watching basketball, the playoffs. And unfortunately, you get stuck watching commercials sometimes. I try everything I can to avoid that. But we watched the game last night and there was this like 10 different fucking commercials for horror movies. Like, who the fuck likes horror movies? We need to do a deep dive on that. Who the fuck likes horror movies? And what actually is it in you that likes a fucking horror movie? Have you ever been in those situations? Because if you have, you don't want to fucking think anything of it. You don't want to let your little mind run out of control. Dude, I grew up in the fucking mountains and there was some nastiness around. And I spent my entire childhood saying, there is nothing I need to fear. I can't fear, even though you're walking through the dark in the mountains. And there's fucking bobcats and wild and mountain lions and bears and what else? Coyotes. Now wolves in Colorado because of the bleeding heart liberals in Boulder. We got too many wolves. They're slaughtering they're not going to just slaughter elk and deer. They're going to start slaughtering pets until they start slaughtering humans. I mean, the mountain lions get one or two humans every year, right? Why am I saying that? Because I'm saying, hey, we need to walk around, fear not. But horror movies? The fuck out of here. Don't placate the devil. Because if you know anything about the devil, you shouldn't be fucking dealing with them at all. I can't fucking stand horror movies. Let me know in the comments what you think about horror movies. I literally can't say that I've ever watched a fucking horror movie. And if I ever started, this Friday the 13th, fuck out of here. Fuck out of here. A bunch of people faking evil and death and destruction and perversions. Cool. I can't believe you're making fucking money doing that. Yeah, not gonna lie. Some people are like, man, if I found out that my family or the guy I worked with is a Trump supporter, I'll hate that motherfucker. Matter of fact, I think they should all be shot. People get like that. Or vice versa, Obama, Biden, whatever. That's how I feel about horror movies. If I find out somebody's like, oh, I love horror movies. I'm like, what is part of your brain is broken? You've either never seen horror, which, if that's the case, no, it just doesn't make any sense. We need to have a deep dive here. Give me some comments. Oh, we got a comment. Penny Pebble. Rippler is in the house. We have a person in agreement. Well, thanks for chiming in, PPR, because I don't know. Even if a movie's good, like maybe these horror movies are like super quality movies, wonderful acting, a plot that's intelligent, but I don't think they are. I will say this, the Blair Witch Project I watched. Now, there's a fine line between the unknown that scares you and then just gory madness. Because the thing about the Blair Witch Project is that it didn't show anything. And it was, frightening. I still don't like it. I still don't fucking like it, but I will say that it's probably better than most horror movies. I mean, the Kill Bill style of old kung fu movies and what Quentin Tarantino did to those kind of movies, which I'm not a big... I like John Wick. I'll say I'm not opposed to egregious violence, but egregious Hollywood violence. But I wasn't always that keen on Kill Bill or Django Unchained, or I don't remember all the violent ones. I mean, Pulp Fiction was great. Reservoir Dogs, great. Plenty of little violence in there. But how could any fucking horror movie compare to any of those? I don't know. We're gonna have to figure it out. Till next time. Oh, no shit. Right before I leave. Blair Witch was filmed not too far from me. Let me see if I can remember where you're at. Are you in Pennsylvania? No. That's where I picture the Blair Witch Project, was probably like in the Northeast. And if I remember... I know I had a bunch of commenters that were from Canada, but I cannot remember. Maybe because it says Penn, I'm thinking Pennsylvania. Maryland. Okay. The Blair Witch Project was primarily filmed in Maryland, specifically in the small historic town of Burkittsville and the nearby woods of Seneca Creek State Park in Montgomery County. Additional shooting locations for the movie included the cemetery at Burkittsville Cemetery. Interesting. Maryland, yeah, Northeast. Crazy. There's evil out there. That's the thing, is if you've seen evil, you know what it is. You don't need to be reminded. You don't need to pretend. Like, if you've seen real evil, you don't want fucking anything to do with it. All right, I gotta go. Good night, everyone.